Have you ever met someone who genuinely, truly just enjoys being alone? And I don't mean someone who's lonely or depressed. I mean someone who actually thrives in their own company. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're uncovering the hidden psychology of solitude. We're going to break down some seriously fascinating source material that completely flips the script on how we look at independence and isolation. Because as it turns out, a lot of people who prefer solitude, they aren't actually running away from people. They're running towards something else entirely. And believe it or not, that journey almost always starts way back in childhood. So I want to ask you this directly, right out of the gate. Why do some people genuinely prefer being alone? You know, especially here in the US, our culture is constantly buzzing, right? We're taught that being this highly social butterfly is the ultimate baseline for happiness. So when someone actually prefers to just be alone, society instantly slaps a label on them. We just assume, oh, they're antisocial. But what if that's entirely wrong? What if we're literally misreading the entire situation? Now, let's validate something right now. We are not talking about isolation out of despair here. We're talking about an active, genuine desire for solitude. Let's think about what this actually looks like in day-to-day life. We're talking about the person who skips the massive parties, the one who might just completely disappear from group chats for days at a time and feels totally fine about it. They can spend an entire weekend entirely by themselves, not even step foot outside the house, and they don't feel a single ounce of FOMO. If you're an introvert or maybe a highly sensitive person, I bet you're feeling pretty seen right about now. And let's be real for a second. There is absolutely nothing quite like the pure, unadulterated relief when plans get canceled. You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about, right? You're getting ready to go out, maybe you're already dreading all the small talk, and suddenly your phone buzzes with that text, "Hey, so sorry, something came up, we gotta reschedule." Boom. Instant joy. It's the best feeling. Society assumes having that reaction makes someone distant or cold, but the psychology we're unpacking today, it suggests something way more profound. Okay, let's dive right into this because here comes the major paradigm-shifting plot twist. It's called emotional adaptation. Basically, this is the subconscious process of learning to create comfort by yourself when relying on other people just feels risky. Look, as kids, we're supposed to learn one absolutely crucial lesson, that other people are emotionally safe. When a kid is upset, they naturally seek out an adult for comfort. But what happens if that child is met with constant criticism? What if their vulnerability just leads straight to rejection? Well, the child's brain learns a new subconscious rule. Relying on other people is a massive risk. So in this brilliant move of self-preservation, they adapt. They learn to create comfort all by themselves, relying entirely on self-sufficiency. And this brilliantly illustrates the reality of that adaptation. Independence can sometimes be a scar wearing a medal. I mean, just think about how powerful that is. Years later, society looks at these adults and just showers them with praise. We say, wow, you are so incredibly independent. You really have it all together. But underneath that extreme, rock-solid independence, there's often a kid who learned, through really hard experience, that being alone simply felt way safer than being disappointed. It's not just a personality trait, guys. It is literally a survival mechanism. Section 1. The hidden patterns of solitude. We're going to expose the actual mechanisms behind this and break down the childhood patterns that train people to crave being alone. Once you see these patterns, I promise you, you cannot unsee them. Let's get into pattern number 1, insecure attachment. Imagine growing up in an environment where you simply do not know which version of your parent or caregiver you're going to get on any given day. Some days they're wonderfully warm, super attentive, and other days they're completely distant, unreachable, or cold. There's just zero consistency. The brain absorbs that massive inconsistency and writes a brand new script. Connection isn't safe, alone is stable. When love feels unpredictable, you naturally stop running toward it, and you start pulling away. It's not that you don't want connection. You just learn that inconsistency is a huge risk. So you become someone who actually enjoys people, but only in small, controlled doses, keeping a bit of emotional distance. Why? Because alone doesn't suddenly flip a switch on you. Alone is predictable. Now we move to pattern number 2, ignored emotions. This is a much quieter kind of childhood experience. It doesn't leave those obvious visible scars, but it shapes absolutely everything. This happens when a child is upset, but they're constantly told they're just overreacting. They try to explain why they're hurt, and they just get dismissed. They just needed someone to listen, but no one ever really did. And when that happens enough times, the child simply stops. They stop explaining, They stop expressing, and most tragically, they stop expecting any support. Their brain creates this hard and fast rule: handle everything alone. As adults, this shows up in incredibly subtle ways. These are the folks who rarely open up emotionally. They process all their stress totally internally, and they never instinctively reach out when things get hard. And that's simply because they learned a long, long time ago that support just wasn't going to be there. Which brings us to pattern number 3, forced emotional independence. Look, some people never chose to be fiercely independent. They were pushed into it way too early in life. As a kid, they had to handle their own problems. They had to calm themselves down and figure things out completely alone long before they were developmentally ready to do that. Now, what's really fascinating here is the total disconnect between how society views this and what it actually is. On the surface, this forced independence looks exactly like strength, right? You look highly capable, super responsible, totally self-sufficient. But underneath that armor, there is a profound discomfort with vulnerability. A deep, deep discomfort with needing help, because in their childhood experience, needing help felt like being ignored, or worse, it felt like becoming a burden to their stressed out parents. So they convince themselves they don't need anyone, and solitude basically becomes their controlled safe haven. Let's look at the fourth pattern, social overload. This one is all about the nervous system. You see, not everyone experiences the world with the exact same baseline. If you grew up in a household that felt constantly overwhelming, maybe it was filled with arguments, thick tension, heavy pressure, or just general unpredictability, your nervous system was forced to adapt. It became hyper-alert, highly sensitive. It gets easily drained by all the emotional noise around you. And this brings us to a major aha moment in this explainer. Solitude isn't avoidance, it's recovery. For these individuals, being around people isn't just a fun time socializing. It's massive stimulation. It's constant input, reading the room, processing other people's emotional energy. Solitude is the only place where there is zero pressure to perform, no emotional noise to process. It provides just enough distance for an exhausted nervous system to finally slow down. Our fifth pattern ties incredibly closely into this: high sensitivity. Look, some people are simply wired differently right from day one. From a very young age, they just feel things more deeply, more intensely, and more frequently than others. They notice the tiny, subtle changes in someone's tone of voice. They pick up on the silent tension in a room that literally everyone else is ignoring. They absorb emotions, even when those emotions don't actually belong to them. As a child, absorbing all of that without knowing how to process it, that is incredibly overwhelming. So they find their own way to cope. They step back. They create space to just breathe. And as adults, this pattern stays completely active. I want to reassure you right now. Highly sensitive people do not avoid others out of hate or malice. They're just limiting exposure to let their inner world rebalance. Without that space, everything just becomes way too much. Section 2. Rethinking solitude. We've uncovered the trauma, the adaptations, and the hidden wiring. Now it's time to shift gears from just understanding the past to actually taking back control of the future. Okay, let's dive into a comparison where society usually gets things completely backwards. There is a massive difference between being lonely and being alone. Loneliness is that deep, painful state of lacking connection. It hurts. But choosing to be alone? That's entirely different. It's intentional. It's controlled. People who prefer solitude are absolutely capable of deep, loving connection. They're just highly selective because they know for a fact that not everyone is safe. When you put all these patterns together, it reveals the core thesis of our explainer today. You were not born wanting to be alone, you adapted into it. Being alone was never the problem. For you, being alone was the solution. At some point, solitude just felt a whole lot safer than being misunderstood or let down. I really want you to internalize this next point. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. You're not broken, you are not inherently cold or incapable of connection. You're simply someone whose mind did exactly what it was supposed to do. It protected you. You learned how to survive emotionally without depending on others, and honestly, that takes immense strength. But here's the ultimate trade-off we have to face. The exact same patterns that protected you as a child can severely limit you as an adult. When you stop needing people, you kind of stop letting them in. So you really have to ask yourself, are you defaulting to solitude or are you actively choosing it? Defaulting feels automatic. It's invisible. It's this unquestioned escape mechanism. Choosing solitude, however, feels calm, intentional, and empowered. It's literally the difference between running away in fear and just stepping back to recharge. The goal here isn't to magically force yourself to become some loud extrovert. The goal is awareness. Because you don't have to stay completely isolated to feel safe anymore. You deserve connection that doesn't drain your nervous system. You deserve people who do not view your needs as a burden. You deserve relationships where you don't have to shrink yourself down just to stay in the room. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway is this: awareness gives you your power back. Solitude isn't a flaw. It's a wonderful place to think clearly and get grounded. But it shouldn't be the only place you feel safe. Maybe you were never too distant. Maybe you were just protecting yourself in literally the only way you knew how. But now that you understand the psychology behind it, you don't just have to survive it anymore. You have the power to actually choose something different. Which leaves us with one final lingering thought for you to take away today. I want you to dig deep into your own habits this week and ask yourself honestly, do you choose your solitude or do you default to it?